Some of you are reading statistics and are frankly freaking out because it's really hard to interpret what's the data. Some places say the mortality rate is 4%, 3%, 1%, 0.2%.
The same as influenza.
And how can you know the difference, especially when things are constantly changing? So there's this great website of worldometers, and some people have come up to me and have quoted numbers from that.
In this video, I'm going to try to make sense of them.
So you scroll down and it'll show you a list of all the countries. And it lists by the number of total cases. But this is not a very reliable number because it depends on how many tests each country has applied. The most reliable number is actually the total deaths, because those are the most solid that were tested, and you can't rely on places where they weren't prepared on how much they tested the population. So I like to sort based on the number of deaths. So you can assume the death rate of the virus is about similar between countries. It's not exactly that because it depends on how many ICU and the ICU care that's available, but let's assume that that's about the same. So then you want to go back from the number of deaths.
What I've done is take the original data from that web page and I cut it and paste it into Excel. This is less cluttered. I've decided that the total deaths is about 0.2%. And what I've done from there is predicted how many cases there should be given a certain amount of deaths. So from that I calculate the total deaths divided by the assumed death rate, and I get the total predicted cases here. I do that for every country. And then I look at how many percent of cases were actually tested. There's 3,400 dead in Italy. If the death rate is 0.2, it's predicted that there should be 1.7 million people with the virus, but they've only seen 41,000. And you see these are the highest hit places. Then you can go down the list, and the first countries with a bump where they're actually testing more is the United States, then South Korea. And then if you look at Germany, looks like they're testing quite a bit. And you can look down the rest of the countries. Now you may say, hey, how do you know 0.2 is the right ICU death rate? Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's higher, it depends on ICU availability and quality. But what I'm going to show you is that certain countries really come close to that number. Malaysia had 2 deaths, and they tested 900. That's almost this 0.2%. Here, these countries have no cases. I assume, let's say they have 1 case in order to be able to calculate. You can see some countries have gone beyond the threshold of that 0.2% and have tested more patients without any deaths. That suggests that their death rates are actually less than the 0.2%. What are the actual percentage of death assuming the raw cases that are reported, which may be confusing, based on these numbers of tests? And clearly they didn't test all the people, so you get a huge variation. But my point is, with certain countries like Germany, they have gone down all the way down to 0.3%, and Germany is the most significant because they have the biggest numbers of total deaths and actual tests. They're a big country with many cases that has gone down to 0.3%. So the 0.2% assumption is reasonable. I've updated the numbers for early March 21st, and what I'm also going to do is now calculate the percent sick in each country. So let me review a bit. The predicted cases is calculated by taking the total deaths for the country and then dividing by the assumed death rate given a good ICU support. And then to calculate the percent of cases tested, I basically compare the predicted cases relative to the actual reported cases. This is how calculating the percent sick by taking the predicted, dividing it by the population in order to get the percent sick. So this is the percent sick I calculated for Italy, China, Spain, the USA, the rest of the world, and also for Santa Clara County, where I live. Now, clearly for Italy, they are overwhelmed, and the percent mortality in the ICU is probably higher. And what that'll do is actually reduce the percent sick. So, for example, if I change the number here, let's say their mortality is double that, you will see that changes the percent sick. So most likely in Italy, the percent death is higher because they are overwhelmed. And because they are overwhelmed, then the prediction of the percent sick is probably high. I believe this is probably closer to the reality. But for the other cases where the ICUs are not overwhelmed, the other calculation is probably more correct. I hope you've found this informative. The point here is to try to reduce any anxiety when you see various death rates if you calculate it raw, and to show that the ICUs are actually doing a very good job, and most of the variation that you see is actually just because of lack of available testing. Plus, this gives a good tutorial on how some of the data science is done.
Congratulations in making it through this video. Remember to remain calm and take care in these crazy times.